YouTube, how we doing? Today we're going to be going into my first perfect offseason rebuild of the offseason, starting with the Chicago Bears, who own the number 1 overall pick. They have some franchise pieces like Justin Fields. They also have a ton of cap space to be able to make a ton of moves if they deem necessary. We're going to be going into all of that, from the cap casualties to the draft picks to who we're going to sign in free agency, and we're going to show you what this roster looks like and after the offseason. But starting off, we're going to go ahead and look at what the 2022 roster looked like and on offense and defense, and then go into our free agency. So starting off here, we have the offense, and that is going to be led by Justin Fields. These ratings on the top are, similar to what you'd see in like video games and such. It's just my way of grading them on an overall scale, just according to me, what I think. They're rough grades. They're not set in stone. It doesn't mean that it's perfect science, but they are just off of my grading scale what they are. And right now, Justin Fields had an amazing season. It was a very, very good season for him. Coming into this year, we didn't know what to expect, but he had a very good year, and there's a lot to like for Fields. He definitely lacked the weapons around him, but is in a very solid place with this franchise to keep Fields if they deem necessary, as there's been rumors that he might be on the move. You look at the running back room, we got David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. Montgomery, pending free agent. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. And Herbert, who showed very good flashes when Montgomery went down. He's shown to be a very solid back in this league. Cole Kmet never really broke out yet and still hasn't. Everyone thought this year would be his breakout year. Really wasn't too big of a breakout year. He had a solid year, though. The receiving core, Darnell Mooney was hurt for most of the year. Chase Claypool was a late addition, and he didn't really have the best Bears tenure when he was there so far. And Equanimeous St. Brown, what can you say about him? He made some plays, but it's not a guy you really want to be one of your top 3 receivers. Offensive line, solid, dealt with a lot of injuries, but definitely has some holes. But Braxton Jones was a beast for being a young offensive tackle on this team. He looked very good. Cody Whitehair has just been proven year after year to be as solid as he is. Other than that, like I said, injuries kind of plagued this, and there wasn't a consistent line, but could definitely use some upgrades, and we're going to try our best to do so. Looking at the defense, they are a 4-3 defense. What I have them set up here is having only 2 linebackers on the field with an extra defensive back, just because it makes it a little bit easier and nicer. And a lot of times, 3 wide receivers, 3 corners, it just makes sense. Starting off at the top with the D-line in the trenches, Travis Gibson, very solid young player, but can you upgrade from him? Definitely, but at the same time, he's proven very solid. So if you go into next year with him as one of your starters, you're not upset. Justin Jones is one of the best defensive tackles on this team. He is the best defensive tackle on this team, but he's one of the best defenders on this team, is what I was trying to say. Definitely has that veteran presence to him. Is very solid. Like Justin Jones a lot. Mike Pennell, not much to say about him. He was rotating in and out with guys like Armand Watts. Dominique Robinson, again, another guy who was rotating in and out with other guys, so nothing too special about them. The corner room, Jalen Johnson was hurt a lot of the year, but still comes in at an 81 overall. He is very solid. Kyler Gordon, decent rookie year, definitely can build on it, and he will do so. And Jalen Jones, who was a UDFA, had a very solid year as well. Linebacker core, Joe Thomas, Nicholas Morrow, top 2 guys. Nothing really too special, nothing you can't upgrade from. Nothing you can't replace as well, as Nicholas Morrow and Joe Thomas are both free agents. And then you go to the safeties. Eddie Jackson, again, injuries. Injuries were a big part of the season, and Eddie Jackson was hurt. But shout out to DeAndre Houston Carson, who was the fill-in. He is very solid. I like him a lot. But Eddie Jackson, 84 overall. We all know how good he is when he's healthy. And Jaquan Brisker is one of the better young safeties in this league as well. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and go into the offseason here, transition to the 2023 season, and we're going to get started off with the casualties of the cap. So we only have 3 cap casualties, and none of them are starters, so that's good. We're going to get rid of Al-Qadim Muhammad. It saves about $4 million. It's a $500,000 penalty, which we can eat that $500,000 penalty to save that extra $4 million. Just nothing really special about Muhammad, nothing really that we can't replace. But that $4 million can get you multiple Muhammads if you wanted, So That's why we want to get rid of him. Lucas Patrick, again, another guy who's going to cost $1.5 million to get rid of, but saves you about $4 million. He's not even a starter. He's, what that line that we had already, I don't see Patrick fitting in anywhere. So let's save that $4 million and get somebody who, for $4 million, you could upgrade from Mustafa or from somebody else on that line. And then Trevor Siemian, same thing. Just doesn't fit the role. We're $500,000 penalty, nothing too big, saves you $2 million. Not really too much about the saving. Just not needed on this roster. It doesn't fit the scheme that we're trying to run. We saw this a couple years ago with Daniel Jones in the New York Giants, where Mike Glennon was the backup, and once Daniel Jones went down, the team could not move the ball. Between Glennon and Fromm, I think they were averaging like 7 points a game. It's because the offense changes when you have a quarterback who's mobile, which the Bears obviously do with Justin Fields. You're going to want somebody who's able to replicate that offense, and we're going to be able to try and do that in this offseason. Now going ahead to the notable free agents, we have David Montgomery topping out that list. And it's a big question. Are we going to bring him back? Are we not? Do you pay the running back? Montgomery has been very solid in his time there. He's dealt with some injuries as well. It really could go either way because you could use that to your advantage in negotiations and get him on a cheaper deal. You could also go out there and sign somebody. There's a lot of running backs in this class. There's Miles Sanders. There's Tony Pollard. Dalvin Cook is possibly a cap casualty. Alexander Madison's out there. There's just a lot of guys that are out there in this free agent market that could possibly be a replacement for Montgomery or a complement to Herbert. But also when you look at it, you could get Montgomery for the cheap. So there's a big question mark there, and we'll get into what we're going to do with him in just a little bit. Nicholas Morrow at linebacker, starter. Sam Mustipher, same thing, starter. Armin Watts was a rotational defensive piece. I threw him on there. Riley Reif was a starting right tackle. He was on there as well. Kari Blasingame, who is the starting fullback. I'm one of those guys who like fullbacks are people too. I truly think that they do make an impact when you have a solid fullback, so I threw him on there. Equinemius St. Brown is a free agent, and DeAndre Houston Carson, who we talked about earlier, is also a free agent. Nothing more to really talk about with those guys, but the big question is David Montgomery. What are we going to do with him? And we're going to go into our contract extensions right now. For contract extensions, Kerry Blasingame is going to be getting a 3-year, $6 million deal, about $2 million a year. With these contracts, it's going to show the years and it's going to show the total amount. They can be broken down in different ways. They could be front-loaded. They could be back-loaded, different ways, etc. Options, team options, club options, player options, no trade clauses, all those. I'm not going so deep into it. I'm giving you the base of what I think they could do. So Blasingame gets that $6 million deal for 3 years. It's just going to lock up a solid fullback. You can get rid of him anytime. It's a cheap deal, but it locks him up and gets you somebody that's going to, complement the running game. Riley Reif is going to be added on for another year for $3 million. Nothing too expensive for Riley Reif, and we have the cap space to make the moves. So why not add a guy who can, at worst, be a very solid backup / rotational piece on that offensive line? Armin Watts, we're going to bring back for $2 million for 1 year. Again, another guy who's just a decent rotational piece. Wasn't a starter, but is going to be able to move around there. And for $2 million, it's a pretty cheap deal that you're going to be able to at least help out. Last but not least, we have DeAndre Houston Carson for 3 years, $10 million. He was very, not phenomenal, but very good when he was playing for Eddie Jackson this season. And on top of that, he's been a very solid special teamer throughout the years. And that's what you got to realize with these contracts. We see it all the time. You got to pay your special teamers as well, because that's a part of the game as well. Houston Carson's one of those guys who doubles down as a rotational defensive piece and a special teamer. So we're going to give him what he's due for those roles, and that's going to be a 3-year, $10 million deal, paying him until he's 32 years old. Not too bad of a contract for us, and we have the cap space. Now, we are going to be moving on to notable free agent signings. Now, we're going to be moving on to that, and what that is it's not going to be every free agent signing possible. We're not going to talk about the minuscule signings that are going to be league minimum deals. We're not going to be talking about that. But things that I deem important or I want to talk about are going to be in this next one. And like we said, we have a lot of money to spend, a ton of money to spend. Are we going to spend it all? Are we going to play it safe? How are we going to do this? Let's talk about it. So leading off the notable free agent signings is going to be Daron Payne of the Washington Commanders. We're going to be bringing him into a massive 5-year, $85 million deal to man that defensive front. Deron Payne is one of the best run stuffers in the league. He has been underneath the Jonathan Allen shadow for too long, where people forget how good he is. And hitting free agency this offseason, Washington probably isn't going to have enough to pay him, as they have to pay everybody on that defensive line soon, and a lot of other guys that they have. They're still paying Wentz, etc. So Deron Payne is going to be signed for 5 years, $85 million. We're also going to add to that defensive line Marcus Davenport, 4 years, $60 million. The reason I like this deal a lot, $15 million a year, which, based on his play and his injury history, can seem like a lot, but we're a team that is not as competitive as other teams. We're going to have to pay a little extra to make sure to secure some of these guys, which is A-okay with us, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. But Marcus Davenport is going to add a presence on that edge opposite of Travis Gibson if we go that way. But you're adding, like I said, just a presence on that edge who is a former first-round pick. We're going to get a lot from him, as well as the interior from Deron Payne. Linebacker Devin Bush, we're going to give him a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. Coming off the Steelers, he's been up and down in his career so far. But again, another former first-round pick. We're going to see if he can become what Roquan Smith was for this team, in any shade of that. Obviously, we don't see him reaching that potential, but he did have that potential at one point, so reaching as high of a ceiling as he can would be perfect with us. Jonathan Jones, the corner from the Patriots. He's older. He's up there in age, 29 years old, I believe. We're going to give him a 2-year deal for $10 million a year. That's $20 million in total, just to mentor this young corner group. Kyler Gordon, Jalen Jones, Jalen Johnson. We're going to be able to mentor them, but also provide a very solid performance on the field. Be that number one corner that we have in Jalen Johnson, but also could use at the same time. Provide both of those roles. So I love Jonathan Jones there as well. Taylor Heineke here. I have him getting a 2-year, $9 million a year contract, $18 million. Now, this is one of those contracts where I said I wasn't going to, but throw a team option on there, or throw it a backloaded contract, or a way to get out of it as well, because you never know what to do with backups. But the good backups are going to get paid, and the reason I like Tyler Heineke is because this is a team that we're trying to make. This is the perfect rebuild. This isn't going to be just a good rebuild or anything. This is the perfect offseason for them. If Justin Fields goes down, Taylor Heineke is able to step up and win some games for you. He's going to be able to do a lot. If Justin Fields goes down and you have Trevor Siemian back there, how much is he going to be able to do for you? That's going to be the big question. So paying Heineke this money when we have the money to spend, especially now, and we don't have to pay anybody yet. 2 years, even if we keep him for both years, that contract will be gone when we have to pay some of our young players. Darius Slayton coming over from the Giants for $5 million a year for 3 years. Really like this. He's a deep threat. He's had some inconsistencies with drops, but he is a deep threat. He is speedy. He's made some incredible catches in his career with the Giants so far. So this is just a high upside reward possibility of a signing. If not, you're getting a solid rotational piece, which is still an upgrade over what we have. George Fant at right tackle. We're going to pay him 2 years, $10 million. Just has played solid in every stop that he's been at, recently with the Jets. And like we said with Riley Reif, even though we brought back Riley Reif, we looked at him as more of a stopgap and a possible rotational guy. George Fant is going to be able to fill that role. Then we look at Aaron Brewer of the Tennessee Titans. 2 years, $10 million, $5 million a year. This is more of a projected contract. He has not shown too much to show that he's going to be a superstar interior offensive lineman, but he's been young and he's been good, and that's what you want to be able to pay, especially as a team like this who really wants to strike gold on free agents. You have to make those risky signings. This is one of those. And last but not least, we're going to be bringing in running back Dearness Johnson from the Cleveland Browns on a 2-year, $6 million deal. Again, this is a contract that you can get out of after 1 year if it's not working out. He showed flashes when he was the starter, when Chubb and Hunt were both down in the past couple years. But on top of that, it's a cheap running back option, and it leaves you going into the draft with Khalil Herbert as your number one running back, who proved that he can at least shoulder that workload without David Montgomery. David Montgomery is not on this free agent signing or the extension, so obviously he is going to be a free agent and going on to another destination. It just came down to the money that you'd have to pay him. Can you get his production from Khalil Herbert and somebody else? And I believe that the combination of Dearness and Khalil Herbert is going to get you what Montgomery got you for a cheaper price point. So I like that as well. and there's a way to target it in the draft as well, which we'll talk about. But last but not least, we're going to be going into any trades that are going to happen before the NFL drafts. We have accepted a trade from the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to be giving up the first overall selection in the NFL draft to the Las Vegas Raiders, and we're going to be acquiring pick 7, pick 38, 2 first-round picks, and a second-round pick. A very big haul for us. It's similar to some other deals made in the past. You can move around things, maybe take out the second or change the 25 first to a second, or I don't know. There's different ways you can mingle it to make it fair in your eyes, but this is just a base point of what I viewed as a good trade. Giving up that first overall pick, again, we're a team that is able to compete, but not necessarily a Super Bowl or win now, and we don't need a quarterback, which is what everybody's looking for at the first overall pick. So could we have stayed at the first overall pick and taken a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter and helped out this team tremendously? Of course we could have. But getting this haul of picks is going to not only help us this year, because we're still staying in the top 10 and getting an extra second-round pick that's a high pick, but it's going to help us in the future as we acquire those top talent picks in those future. So now we go over to our mock draft simulation, and this is all done on Pro Football Network as of right now. So there's going to be different ways that it's going to be looked at. You might say, oh, why didn't you take this player here? He might have already been gone in the simulation, so there's different things that could happen. I make it as fair as possible that I can do. But here we have edge Myles Murphy from Clemson going at pick number 7. So, yes, we strike out on Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, which is unfortunate. But like I said, you're getting that future draft capital, and now you're adding an edge presence in Myles Murphy, who's going to be very solid. At 38, we're going to be taking Jahmyr Gibbs, running back out of Alabama. This guy has first-round talent all over him. He falls all the way to 38, which can definitely happen in the draft as running backs are not usually going high. You look at this, last year Breece Hall was the best running back. He fell into the second round as well. You look at Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he has talent that is similar to what Breece Hall has, because Bijan Robinson's at that Saquon Barkley level. Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker were very solid running backs this year, very, very good. I think Jahmyr Gibbs can be that good for us as well. John Schmitz out of Minnesota is going to be our selection here at 53. Interior offensive lineman, can play mostly center, but can move around in the interior offensive line. I like him a lot. Christopher Smith out of Georgia, just a good safety prospect that we're going to be able to use as a rotational piece. Eddie Jackson, we don't know how much longer he has there, so we're going to get somebody to develop while Eddie Jackson's still here. At 101, we're going to take another receiver in Parker Washington out of Penn State. This is just a receiving core that needs more depth and more talent on it, so getting Parker Washington is going to help us out. At 132, we're going to take Jordan McFadden from Clemson, offensive tackle. Again, just adding more talent to this offensive line, giving more rotational pieces and developing as much as we can. At 133, we're going to take another corner, Noah Daniels. We're at this point in the draft so you got to look for special teamers and guys who are going to be able to help a lot when you really come down to injuries and such. I think Noah Daniels will be able to do that for us. At 155, tight end Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion. Cole Kmet has not worked out in the perfect situation, but you're going to at least get somebody here to develop behind him and hopefully, be your tight end 2 at this point. And maybe you strike gold and get somebody that can progress past Kmet, but at the end, this is just another weapon at the tight end position. Last but not least, we're going to be taking Christian Young out of Arizona, safety, 197th overall. Again, special teams, rotational pieces. That's really what this end of the draft is going to be looking like. So now we're going ahead and looking at the 2023 Chicago Bears. Justin Fields at that 78 overall still, but now in the backfield, Jahmyr Gibbs, who is a knockdown on overall points. The reason why he hasn't proven anything in the NFL yet, so I'm not going to give him what I think his ceiling is. I'm going to give him what I think he is going into his first steps in the NFL. Him and Herbert knocking out that double rotation there with Cole Kmet still at tight end. At receivers, you still have Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool, but now you've added Darius Slayton as a deep threat in that third receiver role. Don't forget about Parker Washington. We just added in the draft. In the offensive line, Braxton Jones and Cody Whitehair still man that left side as good as they can. I decided to put Aaron Brewer here over John Schmitz because, he's a rookie. We just paid Brewer some money, so I think Brewer would get the advantage in the first team reps to start off. But then you got Tevin Jenkins and George Fant on that right side, a very much better and rebuilt offensive line to pair with this offense and give Justin Fields more weapons, which obviously you look at this isn't a Super Bowl contending offense, but it's a step up from where you are, and you now with multiple picks in the next 2 drafts, you're set for a very solid offseason for the next few seasons, but you're also set for a season that you can compete right away. Then looking at the defense, we have Miles Murphy, Justin Jones, Deron Payne, and Marcus Davenport on that defensive line. Just an absolute star-studded defensive line. I love this defensive line that we built, especially for a 4-3. They're going to be able to create pressure, stop the run. It really is going to do a lot and get to the passer with Miles Murphy and Davenport on those edges. At corner, we got Jalen Johnson and Jonathan Jones. Just a very good tandem of two corners there. We really like that with Kyler Gordon in that slot at 74 overall. Linebackers, we have Devin Bush and Jack Sanborn, who was playing very good before injury. So I think that he would go into this year as the starter, and that would be okay. This is a position where you could re-sign a Joe Thomas or a Nicholas Morrow or somebody to stay there, but I think I trust Sanborn enough to be at that role. And last but not least, the safeties are still Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker. So without further ado, that is going to be it for me. Please let me know what you think about this perfect offseason rebuild for the Chicago Bears. We went pretty spending crazy, but we still had over $40 million in cap space left over, which is beautiful for season-long transactions and extensions, etc. But let me know what you think about it all. What would you do differently? Who would you sign different for this team? Who would you draft different for this team? Please let me know all in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' situations. And if you guys want to build your own team and you wonder how I did this, go ahead and check out the link in the description to SpotTrack. They have an amazing tool here, and they are able to help you out and kind of let you build your own team, if you will. But like I said, without further ado, that is going to be it for me. If you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave it a like. Subscribe if you are new. If you didn't enjoy the video, just refresh that page. Let me know what you think about it a second time. Be sure to use code Sormani at Underdog Fantasy, SORMANI at Underdog Fantasy, and it'll get your first deposit matched up to $100. It'll match it 100%. Well, without further ado, that is going to be it for me. I'll see you guys in the next one.